So Max Verstappen is your 2021 Formula One World Champion, and over 23 races, it came down to the final lap who would win the World Championship. And there's a lot of controversy that we're still trying to figure out to this moment. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss that. So, I'm starting this channel up again. I know I'd done a couple of videos on it last year and then basically didn't do anything else really after that. And yeah, I'm going to start this channel up again. So it's going to be a little different. The videos aren't going to be as heavily edited as they were before, though they're going to be edited in some amount. Obviously, I'm not just going to take one straight video of me talking. But yeah, anyways, enough of that. Let's get on to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So, that was insane. Let's start just from the very beginning, right off the start. So, Verstappen was on pole, but Hamilton had a much better start than Verstappen and got the lead from him in turn one. And that kind of set the tone for the next 54 laps after that, because Hamilton kept that lead for most of the rest of the race. We'll talk about that later, but there was a lot that happened in between that. So, they made it all the way to, I think it's turn 6, without having any major controversy. So, that's like a new record or something for them. But, coming down that long straightaway, the first long straightaway, the backstretch, Hamilton was still leading, obviously, at that point. Verstappen was right behind him, and he had quite a big run from that straightaway. And Max sent it up the inside of Hamilton into the turn 6 chicane. Now, he sent it way too hard. There's no question. But, right, just live TV, I think David Croft, I think that's Martin Brendel, and then I think most people had just seen that live and thought, well, that was Hamilton going wide and gaining an advantage. He gained like a second and a half from that after Verstappen pushed him off. So at the very beginning, it looked like clearly Hamilton's going to have to give the position back and Verstappen's going to be leading. But upon further review by the stewards, they said, no investigation necessary. Hamilton can keep the lead. They said he gave back the advantage he gained. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail because I think I agree with the overall ruling of no action taken, but not the way they said it. Because after looking at it more, Verstappen clearly sent it too far, and he got all the way over to the other side of the chicane before he really even started turning, so Hamilton got pushed wide. But at that point, Verstappen was ahead, so that made it look like at the very beginning, without much deeper analysis into it, that, well, Verstappen was leading and Hamilton went off and took the lead. So it looked like a very clear-cut Hamilton has to give the position back. Basically what the FIA said, which I kind of agree with, is that Hamilton got pushed off and was pretty much forced to go wide. What I don't agree with is what they said after that, which justified that, because they acknowledged that there was a lasting advantage gained. It was like a second and a half from Verstappen just being a nose ahead to Hamilton leading by a second and a half coming out of that chicane. And the FIA said he gave that back by the end of lap 1. But I'd like to see what they're referring to, because I don't think he really did. I appreciate the kind of hands-off approach to it, though I'd say I appreciate that more in general than right now. There have been some more egregious things that the FIA hasn't taken any action on that I think they should have, and I think the issue is it set a tone. I think you can refer back to Brazil when Hamilton got pushed off by Verstappen after the first straightaway there. And I think it was a bad decision by the FIA not to take any action or give Lewis the position or anything, because that set a tone of basically they're gonna let what happens happen, and that kind of set the tone for this, because I think you could make the argument that Hamilton should have at least actually had to give up the advantage gained, or at least get close enough to Verstappen that he could make a pass attempt or something. It didn't seem like there was any time he actually gave back a position. I don't think, after looking back at the replay, that he should have actually had to give up the lead, because Verstappen just sent it and it didn't stick at all. So I don't think Hamilton should have to give up the lead for that, but I do think he probably should have had to give up whatever advantage he gained, because at that point, Verstappen was out of DRS range, and that ended up probably causing a bit of issues for Max, because after that, Verstappen was, like I said, out of DRS range, and he just kept slowly losing time, which makes it obvious that Max was the slower car. What it puts into question is, because he wasn't the slower car by a lot, would he have been able to keep up if he was in Hamilton's DRS? Which, maybe, probably not, but it's possible, and I think you could probably make the argument that Hamilton should have had to give up at least a second or something so that he was much closer to Verstappen. But in the end, it was lap 1 of a race that really felt like kind of an eternity. So, at pit stops around lap 15, Verstappen came in first and bolted on hard tires. Hamilton came in the next lap to do the exact same, so it looked like Hamilton was pretty much trying to cover Verstappen's strategy. But Sergio Perez, who was in third after passing Lando Norris on the start, stayed out. Now, this is an obvious tactical decision by Red Bull, because they were basically going to leave Perez out there to hold up Hamilton whenever he caught him and then come in. So, let's talk about that. Sergio Perez is insane. He managed to force Hamilton to give up about 8.5 seconds worth of time to Verstappen by at the beginning, when Hamilton had first caught Perez, it looked like he was just going to blow by him, because he caught him right around the start of the first of the 2 long straightaways. But Perez was able to actually maintain that lead down the first straightaway. Hamilton got him in the chicane, and then Perez blew back by him with DRS on the second straightaway around the outside, and then he was able to hold Hamilton up by quite a bit through Sector 3, including in the hotel section, where he pretty much just parked it and went around at 45 miles an hour and slowed up Hamilton dramatically. And you could see the gap dropping by seconds every time it would refresh. So Verstappen gained quite a big advantage from that, and he acknowledged that right after Hamilton finally did pass Perez a lap later. Red Bull seemed very appreciative of that, and I think it kind of indicates that the way Christian Horner and Verstappen reacted to that, I'll show you a clip of their reaction here.
Out of the way.
Oh, Checo is a legend.
Absolute animal.
So yeah, the way they reacted to that pretty clearly indicates that they were happy with that, and Perez did about the best he could have possibly done. So well done, Checo. So midway through the race, there was a couple of incidents. First of all, Raikkonen had gone off at the end of the first long straightaway at the turn 6 chicane and put it in the wall, though he only had wing damage, and it was to a point where he could get out and drive away. He then drove back to the pits and parked it. So that is sadly the kind of underwhelming end of Kimi Raikkonen's career. But yeah, that's sad, and I'll talk about that later. But that did not end up bringing out any type of virtual safety car or anything that would actually mess with the leader's strategy. And basically all that did was just end up making Raikkonen have to retire from the race and ending his career. So I'm actually going to talk about that in a later video where I talk about the more midfield battles of the race, because I think that it's quite a loaded video just talking about Hamilton and Verstappen. So I want to give this its own video and then talk later about the midfield battles when I can like rewatch the race and actually focus on that. But yeah, until then, that'll be coming out, I guess, sometime this week. Yeah, so I'll talk about that all later. George Russell also had some type of, I think they said it was some type of engine issue, and he came in and retired. Probably 10 or 15 laps later, Giovinazzi also had an issue, and he said it was some type of issue where he was stuck in gear. So he had to park the car, and where he stopped, he was probably about 100 or so feet away from a marshal's post, so they had to bring out a virtual safety car for that. Now, the way things worked out, Verstappen was able to pit and Hamilton wasn't. Verstappen had more than a pit stops worth of gap between him and Perez behind, and Hamilton was only about 15 seconds ahead of Verstappen at the time of the VSC, so if he pitted and Verstappen didn't, Verstappen would have gained track position and would have gotten the lead back. So, Hamilton was not able to pit and Verstappen was, which set up a very interesting position because there was going to be about 20 laps left in the race, and Verstappen had newer tires than Hamilton, and we were basically going to end up with a situation like what happened in France or what happened with Mercedes in Barcelona, where the guy behind is on newer tires than the guy in front and has X amount of laps to catch them. So that didn't end up working out very well because after the race went back green, Verstappen was catching, but not by a lot. Because by the time we got to lap 53, where Latifi crashed, I think it was an 11-second gap between Hamilton and Verstappen, and it had been pretty steady at that, slowly closing, but not to any point where Verstappen could have caught Hamilton by the end of the race. It was basically at a point where Verstappen was going to need a miracle. And then it happened in the form of Nicholas Latifi. So just after the hotel, the corner after the hotel, Latifi had spun, getting on the power, and crashed. It was in a very dangerous position, basically right on the racing line, and there was quite a bit of debris to clean up, so very obvious safety car. And with 5 laps to go, there was actually a question as to whether or not they would be able to get the race back green. Because with a lot of debris like that, there was questions over, first of all, safety. If you didn't, take time to make sure they cleaned up all the debris, you could end up with cars getting punctures. Though for a 1-lap race, that wouldn't be too much of an issue, as long as it wasn't a quick run over the debris and immediately puncture your tire. It was still at a point where the FIA needed to make sure that they weren't going to end up with anyone running over debris and getting a puncture. And that cleanup in itself took quite a while because of the fact that it was on the racing line, and it's a place where basically the track width is the extent of the gap between the walls. So it wasn't like they had a runoff area to go clean it up in and so that caused its own issue. And they had to kind of work around that. So they only got the incident cleaned up around lap 56. Now, at this point, Hamilton was leading, and there was 5 lap cars in between him and Verstappen. And they were trying to figure out what to do. Generally, the FIA would wave them around, but the issue is that would cost them an extra lap, and at the point where they were going to get at most 1 lap in, that wasn't going to work. So, what they decided to do was to not let the lap cars around, and basically just keep them there. seemed like a pretty fair thing. Verstappen had also gotten a chance to pit under that safety car, while again Hamilton didn't. So Verstappen was on new softs and Hamilton was on very old hards. So that was not going to be a very even match at all. The only thing that could give Hamilton a slight advantage was those lap cars. It was probably going to be a pretty fair compromise to have Verstappen basically getting a free pit stop, but there was 5 lap cars between him and Hamilton that, even though they would keel over on the start-finish straight because blue flags, the gap would still exist. They would still have 5 cars worth of a gap that Verstappen would have to fill up and catch Hamilton, especially considering the nature of Abu Dhabi. He would have had to catch him by the end of the second straightaway. But on lap 57, with half a lap until the restart, Michael Masi changed his decision and let the 5 lap cars around. But very importantly, did not let any other lap cars behind Verstappen around. They kept them all there. So, that set up a situation in which Hamilton and Verstappen were right together, with 1 lap to go to decide the championship. There was very little question who was going to win it on track. Verstappen had the much newer tires, and he was then at this point going to be right on the back of Hamilton. And especially on the restart, the way Hamilton did it, Verstappen wasn't too far away from him by the time the race went green. So by the time they got to the hairpin onto the start of the back straightaway, Verstappen was able to send it up the inside of Hamilton. And then they went down the back straightaway. Into the chicane, Hamilton was not able to launch an attack, but into the second back straightaway, Hamilton was able to launch an attack up the outside since Verstappen was defending very heavily on the inside. So he went around the outside, got at best alongside him dead even. And then Verstappen, obviously with the newer tires, was able to carry it much deeper into the braking zone, was able to carry it faster through the corner. And that was basically it. Verstappen, was able to drive away to win the World Championship. And that made a lot of people upset. Most notably, Toto Wolff.
Michael, this isn't right. Michael, no, Michael, that was so not right.
And very reasonably so. Because from Toto's position, they had been cheated out of a World Championship. And honestly, from my position too. Even though I generally don't agree with a lot of the claims made by Mercedes, some of them I think are just kind of stupid. Like when Perez was holding up Hamilton, which was completely legal since they were on the same lap, Hamilton basically said it was dangerous how he was driving. Which, no, he was just driving slow in a part where you can't pass. That's not dangerous. That's just holding up an opponent to give your teammate an advantage. That type of stuff is stupid, but I 100% agree with Toto Wolff being angry at Michael Masi here. Because the rule for letting cars around under the safety car is either everyone goes or no one goes. And Michael Masi broke that rule. And I'll talk about this a little later with the way Mercedes is planning to kind of attack this ruling in another video. So I'm going to have 2 more videos coming out later on. The one about the protests and stuff, that'll be a pretty short video, so I'll probably be able to get that out either today or Monday. So that'll be coming soon where I'll talk about that. But Toto was obviously very upset. Hamilton was also very upset, and I think they were all very rightfully mad about the way things transpired. So that was very controversial, but Max Verstappen did come across the line to win his first ever Formula One World Championship in insanely dramatic fashion. The second time, to my knowledge, I think it's the second time ever, that a World Championship has been won in the final lap. The other time being Hamilton in 2008 with the Timo Glock incident. And this will be as controversial, if not more controversial than that one. Except the issue is that it was not really on track deciding it. It was more what the FIA did, which makes it even more annoying because at this point, everyone is mad at Michael Massey. No matter who you are. I've seen a lot of Verstappen fans on Twitter basically saying, yeah, I may be a Verstappen fan, but Michael Massey messed up. And I 100% agree there. Because, I mean, the rule says either everyone goes or no one goes. And he let the top 5 lap cars go, but the rest of them had to stay behind. And that's very obviously breaking the rules. So, I agree with Mercedes on being upset about this one, but like I'll talk about later, I don't think you can penalize Verstappen because of that. So, that was the World Championship race, and that was chaos. So I'm going to go take a break to just, like, contemplate what just happened, and then, yeah, I'll get back to you with that, decision, with the video about the steward's decision on Mercedes' protest. So, that has been my first video back. This has been Snyder F1. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.